Welcome back, everyone. I'm Janice Lee, pronoun she, her, curator of the exhibition Thirst in Search of Freshwater, if you haven't been with us for the earlier panels. So welcome back, and here we have the very last panel of the day. It's a really special one for the project and for the symposium. We have Christine, who's just arrived from the US on her way back home to Kenya. So really grateful for you making the time and effort to join us today. We have Myrtle Rubenstein coming from New Mexico. We have Jassim El-Asadi coming from the Iraq marshes. Binton Berek coming from London. But also will be telling us more about water access and marine practices in Palestine. So similar to earlier sessions, we have an hour, 20 minutes. So each of the panelists will share a bit more about their practice, their work, their experiences for 10 minutes each. And then we'll have a discussion before we open up to the audience. So I would love to introduce you to our first speaker, Jassim. I can't believe you're here. So this is Jassim's book that I have marked all over for my research. I've read about the story of the marshes a few years ago from a book about traditional ecological knowledge by Julia Watson called Low Tech, and ever since then I've been really interested and then have heard about the project Eden in Iraq Wastewater Garden, a beautiful project bringing together cultural heritage, water science, sewage management, and the revival of the wetland by these two visionary here. So Jassim is a prominent human rights defender, water engineer from the marshes in southern Iraq. He's a co-founder and a head of Nature Iraq, an NGO who works on defending the environment. And Jassim was actually kidnapped in 2023. So this book that I just shared was subsequently published, sharing his experience growing up and working tirelessly for his entire life, advocating for the rights of the marshes. So, Jassim.
Thank all. Thank to Natalie, to Janice Lee, for the invitation and sharing our knowledge in the marshes and the wetland of the southern of Iraq. Thank for all.
Yeah, I can use yours maybe.
I'm Jassim El-Asadi, an environmental activist, and I'm from Marsh Arabis. My mother gave birth to me in the Marshes Center, riding a traditional boat while she was harvesting reeds. I have stories, life experience, and strong bonds with this environment.
لحن ضيم الوقت عنه ضيم الوقت عنهم وتاني ضمير احشاك خلهن ظلام بي نسونا يا نسونا ما ظنتي احبابي نسونا
my presentations about the Mesopotamia marshes and the journey of the life and death. As you see, this is the marshes in 17th, 18th of last century. It is upright, it is very wide. In that time, the rate of the marshes in southern Iraq are around 9,650 kilometers square, and it contains three main marshes. Hawazah marshes, it's a share with Iran, and central marshes, and then the western Hamar marshes. In 19 of last century, Saddam Hussein regime drained the marshes completely, except 10% of Hawazah marsh. It stay with water because that water is the flow from Iran side, from Al-Karkha River to Iraq side. And this is the style of the houses that constructed by the locals, by Arab marshes, from the reeds of the marshes. It is actually same the houses or reed houses that constructed by the Sumerian before 6,000 years ago. And the most of the island is the floating island, is go up with the water and go down with the water if there is a leakage of the water again. And as you see, this is one of the famous villages in the central marshes. And this village is now dried completely. No one there and no house there because there is a shortage of the water since 1991 until now. This area is dried completely. As you see, this is the situation of the marshes at 1973, 2000, and 2004. In 1973, as you see, it is wide. Sometimes it reached until 20,000 kilometers square in a flooded area. And in 20, as you see, it is dried completely because the regime of Saddam Hussein, and then the marshes is returned back after 2003, after when the Saddam Hussein regime fell down. The locals, Arab marshes, cut all the soil embankment that prevent the water to flow to the marshes, and started the marshes return day after day. At 2004, it became a good situation. And these pictures, as you see, the first picture is the green picture of the marshes. This is the same area when Saddam Hussein drained marshes again. This Persian eye, and this picture at July of 2007, before we reflooded the central marshes again. And this river, it is the same, the river you saw it in the first picture. In that time, it named Abu Sabat River. And this is, you see the details of the soil of the marshes. It became a hard. At 2003, as you see the locals, how they cut the soil embankment, and then the water is the flow from the Euphrates and Tigris and another waterway in the southern of Iraq to the marshes. And as you see, the marshes is returned back again, and the women go to the marshes to collect the grasses for their buffaloes or their cows. And everything is became a green. The fish return back again. Also, the bird is returned back again from the Europe, North Europe, Siberia, in each year. But there is a shortage water. It occurred, and there is a drought. It beginning in 2009, and this picture In 2009, the central marshes dried again, and it returned back again to dry at 2015, and then there is a drought again in 2018. But the hard drought is beginning in 2021. Until now, there is no water, and what we happen, it not very good for the water issue. Why? Because the most of the water issue in Iraq, it is a water that come from outside the boundaries of Iraq. 97 of the water of the Euphrates is come from Turkey and Syria, and around 65% of the Tigris water is come from Iran and Turkey, and there is much dams occurred in Turkey and Iran, and they change some rivers that come inside Iraq to outside of Iraq, and because this reason, there is a drought in the marshes. Not, as you see, this is the Euphrates discharge of the water between 1930 until now. As you see, between 1933 until 1973, it is more than 2,000 cubic meter per second, and then until now it reached until 65 cubic meter per second. Tigris also, it go down from thousands of cubic meter per second until now it reached Mosul Dam around 200 cubic meter per second. Why this? Because as you see, this is a dams in Turkey and Syria and Iraq, also in upstream the river, and it is prevent the water to come to Iraq. Also in Tigris there is much dam in Turkey and Iran, and it prevent the water again. As you see, this is what happened in the marshes in 2015 and until now. And these pictures, can you show in it what's the different time of the water situation? As you see, in 2019 until 2020, there is a good water that flow to Iraq, and we keep in our dam around 65 billion cubic meter in that time, and then it finished during 2 years, and now there is only 6 billion cubic meter in all our dam. It is not enough, not only for the marshes, but for the agricultural land. When the marshes is returning back, it returning back by the action of the Arab marshes, not by the governorate. And then there is no plan how we need to reflood it, how much the area that we need to reflood it. Historical, as I told, the rate of it around 9,650, but this is need much water for refloaded it. In 2005, we sit together, the engineering who work in water issue, and we calculate if we need to return around 5,600 kilometers square of the marshes, how much water that we need to it, and then the result that we need 11 billion cubic meter. It is difficult to get this water from Tigris and Euphrates, and the agricultural land, it need between 75 until 85% of the pure surface water in Tigris and Euphrates and another canals. And because this reason, the Italian expert calculate that we can't depend on the 5.4 billion cubic meter from our river, and the other half of the water that we require to the marshes, we can't depend on the main outflow drain. Main outflow drain, it is a huge salinity water that come from the southern of Baghdad until the Gulf. We can treat the water of this main outflow drain and uses it again in the marshes, or we can go and treat the sewage water, and the sewage water can Meridel speak about our project in the sewage water, but there is no anything happened for the sewage water, and the quantity of also the salinity water for MOD is go down because there is no enough agricultural land, because the salinity water, it come from the activities of agricultural land. In any case, this is what you see in different years, what you see, the situation, the percent of the water of the marshes that refloated it. Sometimes we go up, sometimes we go down. We reach our goal in 2019, 2020, and the area that refloated with the water around 97%. But today, the refloated area of the marshes is less than 10%. Maybe it go down in next year if there is no good water, there is no rain in this year. And this is different picture for different situation of the years in the marshes. As you see, sometimes it is very bright, there is a good water, sometimes it is very dark face of the marshes, and because there is a drought. And this is one of the drought years in 2018. As you see, this is kids of some village. They look for the water in anywhere, but there is no water for their activities or their buffalo. The buffalo breeder loses in this 5 years around 33% of their buffaloes, and the fisher loses around 95% of the fish in the marshes. There is no any activities that depend on the water. And also the buffalo breeders, they change their place 5 or 6 times in the year from this area to another area, because there is no grasses, and also there is a pollution. The water go down and the pollution go up. There is much of the network the flow of the sewage to the marshes directly or to the Euphrates and Tigris. As you see now, the situation of marshes is very bad, and we hope that we can get a water. Why there is the drought in Iraq, but why the drought it is very hard in the marshes? There is 3 reasons. The first reason, the policy of the country neighbors of Iraq, Turkey and Iran and Syria. The second, the climate change and the effect of the climate change on the Tigris and Euphrates inside Iraq and outside Iraq. And the third, the bad management of the water inside Iraq, because the most of the water is go to the agricultural land between, as I told, between 70% until 80%. They depend only about the ancient irrigation method, open canal and a huge pump. And because this reason, there is a problem not only between the neighbor country and Iraq. There is a problem between upstream the marshes and the downstream the marshes in Basra and Amara and Nasri. Thanks.
Thank you, Jassim. So Jassim, I don't know if anyone actually registered the dam that we spoke about in the last panel with Elia Shafak, and that is also featured heavily in her book. It's directly related to the situation that Jassim just mentioned, and I think it's something that with all of our speakers will also talk about, is that we, on a land border, things can be a lot more rigid, whereas with water, no matter how you draw a border and assert control, all your neighbors will feel the impact very far and wide. Now going back to something more microscopic, Meridel will be...
Got up too soon, okay.
Yeah, sharing a bit more about the wastewater garden. I'll do a quick introduction to Meridel. So Meridel Rubenstein is an artist whose work focuses on the intersections of nature and culture in the relationship to ecological and social imbalance. She's been a professor of photography, art and ecology, and is currently an adjunct professor at the School of Sustainability at Arizona State University after a long residency at Nanyang Technological University. She's also the project director of the Eden and Iraq Wastewater Garden Project.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, hi everybody. Let's see. One thing I wanted to add is that to Jossam is that the marshes were the third largest wetlands in the world previously, and were the largest in the Middle East previously. You should know that. And that also the Tigris and Euphrates cross on the eastern edge of the marshes. So it's thought to be one possible site of the historic Garden of Eden, which is why we call our project Eden in Iraq. And here what you're seeing, so Jossam's told you about the devastating situation right now in the marshes. When I came into the project in 2011, the marshes, there had been the 2009 drought, but by 2011 there was all this hope. The marshes on the left, they are 20% regreened, and on the right, they're still 80% desertified. And there was just, so you can see on the left maybe what Eden looked like. So Jossam and I, with an international and Iraqi team, have been attempting to build a wastewater garden using phytotechnology that will clean the waste of 7,500 to 10,000 people. And we hope to restore health and bring beauty to this threatened area by the simple technology of phytoremediation using plants. I'm the project director, and I dreamt up this project as an artist, you know, insanely. And after 14 years with my engineering team, they still believe, all male, they still believe in the idea. So we meet all the time. We work on this weekly all the time. But our project, the Eden Iraq Wastewater Garden Project, addresses the difficulties of clean water access for all in a country that has totally mismanaged water policy, and where half of the parliament thinks that environmental work is a dangerous plot by Israel and Mossad to infiltrate Iraq. So we're actually in a dangerous position, as you can see with what happened with Jossam. So just the system itself, this is a little crude diagram, phytoremediation. It's really simple. You gather the sewage. In our country, we gather it with septic tanks. In Iraq, in holding tanks, concrete holding tanks. You've got to dissolve the biosolids. And then through subsurface irrigation, the sewage is dissolved and then run through simple systems using flora to clean the water. In our case, we use both a constructed wetland followed by very detailed piped wastewater cells with plastic liner and gravel to contain the plants. The plants will digest the sewage, thereby cleaning the water, which can then feed secondary gardens or leach fields, as we call them in U.S. These leach fields can grow fruit trees that you can eat above the leaves. So it's not 99% clean, maybe 90%. And so here we all, so this has been a long project, and Jossam and I are aging. And so here we all are when we were young in 2013 on our second trip to the marshes with two marsh acquaintances. We've been offered the backyard of their tribe's shrine for a wastewater garden. So on the left, you see Jossam and me, but then there's Mark Nelson, who, if you were here on Friday night for the film, he was one of the stars of Our Blue World. We're very proud of him. And so also then behind me is Davide Tacchetto. It came in 2013. When we finally got this large research grant, we could expand our team. And so I was lucky to be teaching in Singapore. And so it's a research university, so we received quite a substantial grant, which allowed us to continue. And so we're also sponsored by the Ministry of Water, sponsored by the Ministry of Water Resources, and then below them, there's Center for Restoration of Iraq Marshes and Wetlands. And so in addition to Nature Iraq, we have the Institute of Ecotechnics. And for those of you who know October Gallery here, where we're all staying, October Gallery is also a project of the Institute of Ecotechnics. So they're a nonprofit in UK and in US, and they sponsor us. And so the Ministry of Water Resources has facilitated us building the first third of the wastewater garden, which is simply a constructed wetlands. So you see it in the bottom left corner. That's in May 2023, just initially constructing this site and letting sewage fill it up. And so what you see on the above is the design for our garden from 2017. And what you see there in that picture is the first third of those reeds. So that's what that constructed wetlands should be growing. On the right, bottom right, I've overlaid the design on top of a GPS picture, not a drone picture of the site, of what it might look like with the reeds then filling out in the foreground. And above that, I've laid a side view of the garden where our site is. So it's all imaginary, but there it gives you an idea. Now, here we are right now last week, which is really exciting because, well, first of all, here's the waste coming in. We finally have a fence. And what we did was, samples have been taken on the left of the sewage coming out right at the beginning of the waste coming in. So it's just the biosolids are dissolved, but there's the waste. It's dark brown. And then by the time it traverses across 3 acres, you've got almost clear water. Now this is we're thrilled, actually, we're thrilled, because it hasn't really begun the process of going through our pipe system with the plants. And so this is about maybe 40, we'd be happy if it proves to be 40 to 50% cleaned. And here, okay, so we've had a lot, so I always talk about our project as going 2 steps forward and 10 steps back over 14 years. And I won't tell you all the 10 steps back, but one of them, which was ridiculous, was they just stalled on putting the fence up, and right away, so we had all these beautiful reeds, and they stalled putting the fence up, and the water buffalo and the buffalo breeders got in and cut all the reeds. So 2 summers ago, I got some money, and Jocelyn and Davide, it's a summer, 52 Celsius. And in the summer, they get these fishermen at dawn or dusk, low light, to go in and cut new reeds somewhere else and plant them back. And we've had other problems where the reeds have gone for other problems I won't tell you about. But now, this is last week on your right, and there are reeds. So we're thrilled. This is what, and so the other really cool thing is that if you look on GPS maps of the area, we're the only green area. We're really proud of that. So, but when I started in 2010, when I got interested, what happened in 2010 was I was doing work called Eden Turn on Its Side, and someone told me to turn on 60 Minutes, a U.S. news program. And there was a program about Eden again, about nature Iraq, breaking through those dams and restoring the marshes. And then somewhere in there it says that there are huge sewage problems because everybody's come back to desertified areas and they're peeing and pooping, and it's just running down the street and through people's houses. And this is when we go back. I knew about wastewater gardens, but when we went back in 2011, a year later, what we saw corroborated our idea for this wastewater garden. And also, what was also happening was eventually it wasn't just being, running through the streets. It was now being piped into the Euphrates. And there was starting to be a lot of resistance to polluting the Euphrates, so eventually got dumped in the marshes. So here, just a few more details. On the top, you see a perspective of our design. And what you see on the right, the first third of those reeds that are now growing. And on the left is the design where you see the charbogs, which are in the exhibition, they're Islamic design for gardens, especially in Eden, these 4-part wastewater cells. And there are 2 rivulets that move along down the center of it horizontally, and might have fresh water, might just be blue tiles, but they'd form a little triangle on the right where we'll have medicinal herbs from the 3 cultures that cultures we're talking about, the Sumerian, the biblical, and the Quranic. So in the middle, what you're seeing is that horizontal drawing are the pipe system. That's what the piping does, coming out of the constructed wetlands down through and then into the leach fields. And at the bottom, you'll see in the show, of course, a Mesopotamian embroidered wedding blanket, which is our source of inspiration and something that Jocelyn has helped to revive as a craft. And then we brought those rugs first to Singapore and then to the International Folk Art Market in Santa Fe in 2019. And just a little, here's where the Tigris and Euphrates come together, and this little town, El Kurna, believes this is Adam's tree. And just one thing to add here is, do you realize that Saddam Hussein drained and burned Eden? That's what he did, one of the worst environmental disasters the last century. So here's me. And I had some understanding of wetlands and wastewater gardens, and I knew about losing Eden. The precious wetlands on my family farm in Vermont had just been maliciously drained by a neighbor, so I saw that event when everything dies, kills each other, and it's over. So after seeing the 60 Minutes program, I went right over to see my New Mexico neighbor, Mark Nelson, and convinced him to go to Iraq with me. And then I contacted Nature Iraq. I told them my artist idea. Could a wastewater garden bring Eden back by letting plants transform sewage and eons of conflict into good health and beauty? And I think, oh, right, a little more, just a few more, two more. So this is about Jassim because he doesn't talk enough about himself. Okay, so Jassim is both engineer and artist. He said he was born in the marshes. He describes the blue sky, the green reeds, the fish he saw as he opened his eyes. But he sings and dances, and even in the bleakest moments, he can summon joy and commitment. In the past 13 years, there have been many moments when things look bleak for him and for our project, but whenever we'd get together face to face, whether in Chevalles, Singapore, or New Mexico, the project surges ahead. So we're together again, and we'll come up with new ideas in the next few days. Jassim has faced political injustice throughout his career, as you heard. So one year he was actually nominated for Iraqi Minister of Water Resources, but I think it was just a ruse on the part of this party. But anyway, and then several years later, he's kidnapped by Iran-backed extreme militias that I described cannot stand environmentalists. With the present conditions and lack of funds, whenever I ask Jassim if we should keep going, he responds, our project is important more now than ever, because as long as people remain, we can turn their sewage into greenery that cleans the water and brings health. And our system withstands climate change because it is underground. So I think that's almost my oh no, here's my last slide. No, I'm going to skip this for time's sake. Just my last slide, just a layout of some of the designs and our website. So there's a lot more to tell you about. We've got a really, really detailed website. I've got a few little flyers if you want them, some other pictures, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Meredith. It's so great to hear more about the project. And the bond you two shares, yeah, absolutely beautiful. Well, we can go into a bit more detail in the discussion, but now I'll introduce Binton Berg, who researches at the intersections of water and sound cultures in Palestine, exploring Palestinian ways of inquiring and world-making that challenge colonial authority, particularly in relation to narratives of water scarcity and Israeli settler colonialism.
Do I turn her on? Yes, there you go. Hi, I'm Binton Berg. Thank you so much, Merido. Thank you so much, Ustad Jassim, Handis Jassim. Yeah, I usually work on disentangling what seems to be quite mainstream narratives about water scarcity, so what we think we know about water scarcity, from kind of, and I take that and then I try to incorporate what seems to me to be like a much deeper rooted kind of indigenous knowing about how much water there is or isn't. And the reason why I think it's important to kind of think about the difference between what is poorly distributed and what is genuinely not there is that there are, but it's because I grew up in Palestine. And when you grow up in Palestine, you realize there's a huge investment in making it appear as if there is a serious and severe and like inherent kind of lack and something wrong with the land that needs to be fixed. And what Israeli settler colonialism does as like a way of controlling narratives around water is it tends to make it appear as if it has like a full and kind of absolute authority over the history and the future of the water resources that exist in and on and that pass through that land. And when it tends to do that, it has built a very robust kind of like agroecological industry that exports, for example, irrigation systems to the world, exports kind of desalination technologies to the world, and markets them also as like ecologically like the future. So the reason why I do what I do is because I would like to, take away a monopoly over the future. So the reason why I think rethinking water cycles, rethinking what is scarce and what is not, specifically using how Palestinians know water, how Palestinians know what water there is because it's important not to mistake the Israeli narrative as the singular owner of the future. So yeah, that all came about when in 2018 I started researching how Palestinians ask for rain. And we ask for rain, I'm Palestinian, I grew up there, and we ask for rain by singing nice songs. This is one of the ways, but also, the song rituals that exist are, quite robust. Like they're like thick histories with rituals that also include trance, that also include what you wear, what you don't wear, rituals that also include, collaborations with animals, like your turkeys and your chickens and your donkeys, and you take them out with you. For example, on a little trek with all the children and all the women of the village that you're in, and then you go and you sing the songs in a caravan, let's say, or you're walking in a group and you're singing these songs collectively, and there's a lot of call and response, and there's a lot going on in the songs, basically. So yeah, when I was doing this research, I realized that, of course, we are talking about like a tradition that is in itself liberatory, because communities are saying through call and response is quite like inherently like a little bit democratized, because you are asking for the group's approval over what you are saying as kind of the leader of the group. So the technology of like call and response already was there, but also there were significations that were within the songs that I found that I found really inspiring and liberatory. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that I found was that often when people want to call for the rain, they will go and they will head to the shrine that is nearest to them. And Palestine has a deep, in the region, of course, has a deep history of shrine worship. And when I did my research in 2018, people no longer knew the shrines that were nearest to their families and their family homes. But when people did this, before 1948, before the establishment of Israel, what tended to happen was that they would go and they would ask for water from the shrine. And the way that they would talk about the shrine, like this divine figure, the holder of the shrine, is the neighbor. We're going to go meet the neighbor, this representative of God who just happens to live nearby. So I found that to be not only like an interesting way of like dealing with divinity and like bringing it closer, but I also found that to be quite a really like deep way of transmitting the map through song. When you live here, the shrine lives there. You go, you ask for the help of the divinity that inhabits and passes through the shrine. What you're also saying is, I'm from here and this shrine lives there. After displacement, this knowledge was no longer transmitted. What that means to me is that there's like a mapping tradition that lived in the song, that whatever was written down in the map was either in like an official map, in a colonial map, and a map where the borders were drawn, or the hypothetical borders, which are, maybe propaganda items, we can talk about it, challenge me. The map where the borders are drawn is challenged by the song. And the song says, I live here, my neighbors live here, we're gonna go and we're gonna go ask that guy over there, that beautiful shrine holder, this divine ghost that inhabits this architectural masterpiece that's coincidentally at the top of the hill. So that kind of like mapping divinity through song, through transmission, was one of the most beautiful significations that I found while researching kind of rain summoning in Palestine. I also want to talk about kind of the possibility for the rain summoning to be not just a way that we think about water like justice and distribution, but also about time. Because a big part of the reason why, as I said, I got into the research was because when Israel lays claim to knowledge about how much water there is, it also lays claim to the future. It is kind of this entity that says then, oh, this is how much water there is. It's actually so little. And because it's so little, we are going to come up with technologies that rule the future about water distribution in scarce areas and in supposedly scarce areas. And instead, what I found was people had this extremely like humble and maybe, for me, educationally like non-extractive relationship with their environment. What they were saying was, and a lot of the significations of the song as well, you go out and you say, in order for this plant to survive, we kindly ask that this rain falls. In order, we allocate whatever rain falls. If we are humble enough, then the rain will fall. And we allocate that rain to the mluchiyya plant. We allocate this rain to our wheat plant. We allocate this rain to the donkeys that we love. Why is our chicken screaming in the middle of the night? Because there is no rain, because there is a drought. So it was a kind of like speech that was often like nonsensical, at least to me as a semi-outsider to the tradition, or who had not heard it so distributed, or like so in such a decentralized way, kind of like the local varieties of each of these songs. Because I hadn't heard that, to me it sounded a bit nonsensical. But when I made sense of kind of the assemblages of the songs, what I realized what was going on is also the humans were singing on behalf of, or what they imagined to be behalf of, a lot of different types of creatures. So for me, there's a very specific type of humility in not really laying claim to the land, but trying to be collaborative with God, with whatever you want, trying to be collaborative with the kind of the overall, kind of the third thing that is not you or the environment, or that is you and the environment. So that collaboration for me was, maybe because of my bias, and I'm happy to admit it, but then because of my bias, it's kind of the opposite of this extractive method, which says, oh, there is no water here, so how about we invent this like irrigation system that we kind of, that allows us to lay claim over the future and claim to know how much water there genuinely is. Those are, that's one of the ways that Palestinians are also saying, we may not know how much rain is coming, but we know that the seasonality is moving in this direction. We are expecting this much rain, and it's not coming. But when we sing, what we are trying to say is we are also laying claim to our future. So it's, for me, again, the opposite of the extractive claim over the future. The colonial claim over the future says, this is how much water there is, and this is how much we need in order to be able to grow these mass-produced crops. The Palestinian version of this knowledge is trying to say instead, we will sing so that we have some agency over the future, that we may predict how much rain is coming. And the way that we're going to enact this is by ensuring that our donkeys, our turkeys, our chickens, ourselves, our neighbors, our neighboring villages are all stakeholders in the process of determining this future that we're trying to change. Within this, what I found was quite dear to me, or like what I found like really intimate to me in the tradition, is that it didn't seem to want to be known. So it was, or it was like living in this kind of not fear-based, not wanting to be known, but kind of not wanting to be written down. So it remained kind of. I found it as a tradition. It didn't. There were very few iterations of this song that were recorded. In fact, there was one. There was one iteration of the song that was recorded and kind of transmitted in this like kind of fossilized or ossified version, and it was recorded by like a leftist organization in kind of the early 2000s. And that was how I found out that it existed in the first place. I lived in Palestine between the ages of 0 and 22. So I originally, maybe part of my drive to kind of study the song was, of course, for documentation, for preservation, for wanting it to exist in the future. But then because the song itself transmits this lack of scarcity, this abundance, it's like, it's gonna exist, don't worry about it. The song doesn't actually need your protection. Then I kind of tried to enter into that stage as well. So I was thinking, okay, the song doesn't need to be saved. The song doesn't need to be documented. Maybe the song wants to be rather hidden. So one of the ways that I have been transmitting it is by like a form of improvised performance that just says, here are the songs and here are the kind of transmissions of the ways that we've heard the songs in the past, I don't believe I have any recordings of the song online. What I try to do instead is kind of recreate each of the songs when I perform them in such a way that they may or may not sound like the originals that I heard in my own recordings. I transmit the recordings, honestly, at this point, with the belief that it will rain after I sing them. So I try to kind of ensure that they're being sung in a context that may benefit from being rained in. So this was, for me, a complete change in perspective. I was like, okay, we have to save the song. We have to like make sure that Palestinian culture is being preserved. And I'm like, okay, don't worry. It takes care of itself. And what I can do is be in this moment responding to whatever room I'm in, kind of singing the song as kind of spontaneously as I can, because of my belief in the song and because of my belief in my need for the song and kind of in our need for the song. What else did I want to say? I feel like there's like some very minimal like contradictions in kind of the state of affairs and like Palestinian water scarcity that I want to just touch base on. This should have been context that I gave way earlier in what I'm saying, but I'm gonna pass through really quickly. So most of you may or may not know, I don't know actually, but so around 1993, on the signing of the Oslo Accords in Palestine, it became immediately impossible for the Palestinian territory, which the vast majority of Palestinians don't believe to be Palestine, but let's call it the Palestinian territory, was divided into 3 different types of areas. One of them was Area A, belonging completely to Palestinians. One of them was Area B, through which Israelis could pass. And one of them was Area C, which, according to the Oslo Accords, there was a plan to kind of like slowly for the Israelis to stop annexing those areas and kind of give them back to the Palestinians. None of this obviously ever transpired. But each of these types of areas had a different type of jurisdiction around water and water rights. So I'll give you what we know about Area B, which is the vast majority of the land that makes up the West Bank where I grew up. You're not allowed to collect any rain in the West Bank. Like the reason why this is a ridiculous piece of legislation is because the healthiest soil on the planet is able to absorb a drop of water as soon as it lands there. And that may seem like a bit of an absolute, but simply the more like carbon and nitrogen nutrients exist and are interacting, and the more living creatures live in the land, the more it's able to not let the water slip away into like a watershed that completely takes it away into a different area, and then that means less and less soil erosion as well. So what this piece of legislation has meant in practice is that Palestinians are expected to, of course, an agrarian community like anywhere else in the world, Palestinians are expected to actively corrode their lands and actively destroy or like not make good use of the water wells that have existed in their lands for thousands of years. So this is a kind of like Israeli policy that is tending to the future or is laying claim to the future. It is currently corroding, and all of its like kind of like greenwashing behavior, kind of currently corroding any Palestinian ability to hold on to water in the way that is healthiest for the land itself, regardless of any political leaning that you may have. And in the same, obviously this is one way that also Israeli policy is causing water scarcity, like moving us all, everyone who lives between the river and the sea, to move towards a much more dire situation in terms of water scarcity. Another way that this has happened is through the drying of the Hula Lake and as well the kind of Jordan River using the Tennessee Water Carrier Project. And these are all kind of, ways that that water scarcity has not naturally existed in the land, but rather has been enforced by Israeli colonial policy. And those are all projects that have kind of moved water that existed either in aquifers or in rivers away. And a third thing that I will address that is kind of like a little bit more regional is regarding kind of desalination plants and a marketing strategy that Israel promotes. It uses to promote its own desalination technology. So using this narrative around scarcity, using the words, oh, this land is so scarce and has nothing in it, that not enough water in it, what Israel does is then invents and kind of develops technology around desalination using the Mediterranean Sea, and then kind of with a little bit of wrist twisting, sells a lot of that water to Jordan as well. And of course, what we have in the region is one of the richest water aquifers, what used to be one of the richest water aquifers that is shared between Israel and Jordan. Of course, all of that now has been depleted using Israeli, not all of it, but a significant portion of it has been depleted using Israeli settler swimming pools and Israeli agricultural projects in the West Bank. So take all the water is the usual method, and then make technologies to sell more water to all of your neighbors, because now they are genuinely water scarce. Thank you for listening to me, and I think that's my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's very enlightening, and I think you open with such a good way of approaching water scarcity, because this panel is called Water Access for All, Navigating Scarcity, Injustice and Mismanagement. And it's something that in my conversation with all the panelists, one thing that I've heard from everyone is like, where we're from, water is not scarce. It's what we're labeled as. So I think Christine will speak a bit more about that as well. So quickly, before Christine begins, I'll give a quick introduction. Christine Candy is a peace ambassador and an Indigenous disabled women leader of the Endoros Indigenous community of Kenya. She's also the director of the Endoros Indigenous Women Empowerment Network. She is a committed human rights defender, advocating for the rights of the community with a special focus on Indigenous women and persons with disabilities at local, traditional, regional, and international levels. Christine, over to you.
Thank you so much. Am I audible? Okay, so thank you. Receive warm greetings from Endoros community back at home in Kenya. I'm really privileged to join all of you to share about water scarcity and how that one has affected our community, especially our women, people with disability, and other vulnerable groups. To start with, I come from an indigenous community that had a long struggle for land rights, and they were forcefully evicted from ancestral home. And in our part of our territory, we have a lake, that is Lake Bogoria. It is not just a water body, it also holds a very special spiritual ground for our community. And this water body is a saline in nature. It is high level of alkaline. And what does that mean? It means that when water rises and come all the way to where the neighborhood where we live as a community, it affects our infrastructure, it affects access to one of our spiritual ground, because it has been submerged. So that is to share with you is from this. I wanted to share some of the finding and engagement that we are doing with my community. And as you see there is Lake Bogoria, and we had done some engagement prior between ourselves, Minority Rights Group International, Friends of Lake Turkana, and Endoros Indigenous Women Empowerment Network. We embark on a research on Rift Valley water to establish on the climate change impact on the ecology of the land that we live as indigenous community. So as you know, Rift Valley is a home of Kenya's most important water bodies, and with that is at Lake Bogoria and Lake Turkana. And not only an ecological treasure for us, it sustains hundreds and thousands of indigenous people like Endoros, Turkana, El Molo, and Dasnat. And for generations, this water has provided fish, which is source of food. It has also as a spring for our water as a domestic use. It has a medicinal plant, which is also for healing and all that. It also holds a very special sacred site, and of course for cultural and spiritual connectivity. And today, those as experience are very symbolizing crisis. And Lake Bogoria, maybe to provide a bit of background information, is that it is also a UNESCO Ramsar wetland and ancestral home of Endorois, and has sustained communities through grazing, herbal medicine, honey, and sacred ritual. And and from 2010 up to now, we have experienced almost 50% expanding of Lake Bogoria, which is occupying around 19.6 kilometers square. As per, this was information which was gotten from Kenya Metropolitan Department, Meteorological Department, sorry, in 2022. So these are submerged, one LD facility, 3 schools, sacred groves, grazing land, displacing household, around 186 households has been displaced by that kind of water that has been rising from Lake Bogoria. So on other further note, I want also to speak about Lake Turkana, which is also a World Heritage Site, just like Lake Bogoria. And it is one of the world's largest desert lake and has shrunk by 10%. It has also, in recent decades, this one was established in 2012. So increasing salinity and reducing fish stock is one of the impact. And over the same, I just want to highlight, spotlight more to what does this mean in Rift Valley water crisis, is that Lake Bogoria has experienced rainfall of around 50% in 2010 to 2020, and it has expanded to an estimate of plus 20%, as I've said, submerged 2 LD facilities, 3 schools, sacred sites, and 35,000 acres of grazing land. Lake Turkana on the same has given us a data that has led to 10% and rose by 4.8 in 2019 to 2025, displacing communities. It has a lot of fluoride. There is also the issues of dental and skeleton fluorosis, which is also a critical element that has been experienced in both lakes, Lake Bogoria, communities living in Lake Bogoria and communities living in around Lake Turkana. So around 556,000 people without water has been reported in both areas. And then there is also issues of malnutrition cases, acute malnutrition. There is also issues of shared impact, which is borehole neglected. So with that, as I explained that the surrounding communities have difficulty in getting clean water for domestic use because both lakes are saline in nature. So it means that women and even the access of the same water can easily be used by children for home use, and this has resulted in health-related impact that has been experienced. Like for example, in Lake Bogoria, we realized that around 8 people per month could access medical attention because of bone and fluorosis reasons, which is very acute. It has never been witnessed. And so we want to emphasize, look more on health impact, is that there is the issues of diarrhea being heavily reported. This one, as you compare with the national diarrhea average, is that both lakes, like for example, Baringo produces up to 12.7%. We have also malaria, both in Turkana and Lake Bogoria. We have also, if you look at that, it is coming to around 22.5%. There is severe and acute malnutrition in both areas. There is also the issues of standing growth for children. And of that is that there is the issues of mental health. people as because of that depression, because of undergoing a lot of challenges, displacement, changing in situation that has happened, witnessed in that area, because for a long time, Lake Bogoria and Lake Turkana has sustained livelihood. The immediate ecosystem hold a very important wetland. And because of the rising water levels and water running up and changing water course, we have unprecedented changes within our communities. It has caused a lot of imbalances. There is also the chemical imbalances within the area. All of a sudden, there is also fluctuation of flamingos. There is also fluctuation of wild animals. Also, the health of animals deteriorated. And this one has a correlation with the health of human. So there is a lot of changes that has never been put into policy as a way of trying to mitigate on that. So as I go a bit, I will at glance look at injustices and mismanagement. Like for example, we were looking at the policy level and how the government has also tried to support communities, as this is a very serious problem, is that Rift Valley water crisis expose how policy caps and injustice reinforce each other. On a paper, Kenya Water Act 2016 guarantee equitable access, yet at the shoreline, indigenous communities remain excluded from decision making, while the Universal Health Care Policy of 2020 to 2030 overlook pastoralist and indigenous health needs, and Climate Change Act of 2023 omits their voices in adaptation processes. So we realized that after going through this research document, we were able to look at the glance, which policy does it come in, support indigenous needs and realities, and we realized that some of the policies are overlook the needs and realities of indigenous communities. So those are one of the key observations when we did this research document. And then, of course, we had to look at the county, because in Kenya we have two systems of government. We have the national government and we have also the county government. So we were able to look at what is in the county government. And we realized that Turkana, for example, Water Act of 2019 established the use, sorry, my slides is running so fast. Established the user committee, but less than 25% of budgeted fund was spent in 2023, for example, and in Baringo, a pending water and sanitation bill has yet to be prioritized in Endorois village. And injustices are stuck. Indigenous girls spend almost 3 to 4 hours looking for water, and losing, of course, there is the issues of losing education. Rising lake levels have submerged sacred Endorois site, as I've said, ancestral graves. There is also the issues of harassing cultural identity, and also in Turkana, there is also about 30% of boreholes remain functional, and it is becoming a big problem. So 70% is no longer functioning. So that one means that families are very dependent on unsafe sources of water. As both organizations, we've been able to relook on how we can sustain and provide solution to the problems that we are facing in, because in one hand, we live within a community that has plenty of water, but that water is not usable for us. And we are living in an era whereby we could also use technology to purify those water and make it accessible, and even we can use it to sustain and even irrigate the wetland. So the thing is, it is very imbalanced, it's very ironical to some extent, but as an organization, both organizations, we are looking into building back better in terms of nutritional for our communities, supporting care system, and using indigenous, traditional, ecological, solution on how we can also build back better through songs, or getting nearer to one of the traditional spiritual areas that has not been submerged, and singing and doing what we could do, because we have sustained, for a long, we have sustained our relationship with the lake. Like, for example, Lake Bogoria can easily get worms, the waters can really turn, and it can develop some worms. So as community, we have a way of relating to that. We could sing also. We could also invite elders to come and cleanse the lake. And once it is cleansed, the water become clearer, and it becomes a little bit more conducive for us. So in that, I wish to speak a bit on sustainable livelihoods, and one of it is we've been able to support Endorois women on how they can diversify their livelihood to include beekeeping, and also to establish Endorois Bee Sanctuary, and for nutrition and income, and support crop pollination. We want also to use honey also for cleansing and strengthen our community vitality to the land. So that is how we have developed a strong relationship between the land, and how we have led, especially women leading the process in terms of leading in terms of vitality. We have also had a situation whereby we want to establish a strong agroecology through having a drought-resistant crops. We have led in soil conservation. We have already fenced 2 acres of land, whereby in these 2 acres of land, we are able to plant grasses, and these grasses are good in water holding, so that it can absorb water back to the soil and maybe regenerate the lost wetland. So already we are in process of doing that at the moment. We've already fenced, and we are process of planting those grass. In the next season, our women will be seen going to those rangelands and replanting again, and even singing, and even having a strong memory on how they have led the leadership of recovering back our land. And in that case, we have this land called Kaptombes Farm, whereby we are doing a lot of boosting food security and reducing child nutrition. We are also looking into ensuring that our children have the right food, indigenous food, although our policies in Kenya does not allow sharing of indigenous food. But we are doing this because in our own community protocols, it identifies as a strong value when it comes to food sharing and food security for our children. We have also issues of water access, whereby we want to allow a community-led solution whereby we will be embarking in rainwater harvesting, so that we also access clean water for our families. We have water purification training, affordable method, because when we were exposing our communities to the research finding, some of them, our young people, were able to intervene so strongly and tell us that, you see, we need to, because the world is moving and we have the technology, why don't we find a way whereby we can turn this water into fresh water, and then we will have enough water to use in our farms, and then we have good food for our families and all that. So we were still rethinking on how we can integrate that one with the scientific method, including working closely with research institute in Kenya, especially the Kenya Forestry and Research Institute within our locality, on how we can ensure that that advice or that idea that has been proposed is made into a reality. So we will also have look into maybe possibility of solar-powered boreholes. Public awareness campaign will also be intense in our community, as we want to bring a lot of awareness and public picking it off, and maybe seeing on how the government can directly support some of the mitigation measures to combat issues of water crisis. And then for the health is that we intend to advocate for healthy care access. We wish to establish very strongly community care center, whereby we will be having indigenizing some of our practices and healing methods, because my community, as I've said, has had a long struggle for land rights, and they've endured a lot. And again, the issues of rising water levels has affected their families. So you realize that some of them has been battling with generational trauma. So how do we make sure that we heal our communities? How do we ensure that we come together? We need to establish centers whereby community will come and maybe offload some of those trauma that they have endured. So we look into how we can strengthen on issues of mental wellness, and in that process we also have intergenerational, because we want to ensure that even the younger generation are able to understand and pick some of the struggle moving forward, because struggle are so many, and we will together identify a common solution to the issues that has been battling us. We will also look into cultural and indigenous knowledge. We will, of course, we have looked into how we can protect our sacred sites. They are very important for us. We will also look into supporting traditional medicinal as an alternative, as a solution, as traditional, as a culturally relevant medicinal for ourselves as a community. And of course, we will strengthen on our community protocols, both communities of Turkana and communities of Endrois. We'll look on that. As I conclude, we wish to look on some of the recommendations, especially on the policy, is that based on the key findings and solutions that emerged during the research, the following 8 policy recommendations were drawn up by project team, which include integration of indigenous knowledge into climate adaptation and planning. So we will look at county budgets, county planning, and ensure that part of the resource allocation priorities include those who will enhance on issues of climate adaptation and planning, and strengthen on food security. Expansion of agroecology initiative for improved food security, I've talked about that. Public awareness campaign on public health policy and climate change is also one of the priority areas that we will consider. And we also talk about water waste management, sanitation and hygiene, issues of policy reform and implementation of healthcare policy at the county level. And then we will support our mothers on issues of mobile health clinic, healthcare infrastructure strengthening, and we look strongly on the capacities of our health facilities to ensure that it is functioning and offering the right services to our community. Thank you so much for this, and yeah, so thank you. Be blessed.
Thank you so much, Christine. I obviously have lots of questions, but we only have 5 minutes left, so I will open to the floor first. Is there a mic from behind us? One over there. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you to all the panelists. My question is to Christine. Jumbo. My parents are born in Kenya, so my mom talked a lot about her times in Kenya. So I say this not just to you because of the excellent speech you give, but also as a tribute to my parents as well. My question is my interest for the last 10 years in supply chains and all the issues you spoke about. I just did a quick research on all the resources that are relevant and prevalent within Rift Valley. And this is a core part of my research. All the resources for which your Rift Valley and Bulgaria is being struck up and dug up and excavated and ripped apart, all the minerals required, taken from there, are all minerals essential for this green transition, for solar panels, wind turbines, electric cars, also medicinal purposes as well that we need in the West. My question is on one side we have this desire for this green transition to make the planet safer, to take us to a sustainable, more sustainable place. But on the other side, we want to do something, whether it's for the Kenyans or the Indians or the Chileans. My question to you, Christine, anyone on the panel, if they can answer me, is when water is lost so much for this mining and extraction, what is the situation that we've got ourselves into, where we want this green transition at the same time we want to do something for the indigenous people? Is this not a huge contradiction in terms and a huge environmental abuse of the indigenous people and a huge abuse of us in the north by not telling us that these renewables are littered in the blood of Africans. Thank you.
Christine, would you like to answer?
Yeah, so thank you so much, my brother, for your question. And in regards to green transition, we've been told that is the science, that is the solution at the moment to combat climate change realities. And yeah, the solution and the intention might look okay, but the challenge comes in when those decisions are arrived when we are not aware. So the thing is, whose land are you impacting to provide the green transition? We've seen our government, states, engage in climate negotiation. They go to UNFCCC, talk about climate solution, green transitioning, but at the end of the day, these solutions are implemented in our indigenous land without our knowledge. It becomes a great contradiction. As indigenous communities, we have our own protocols, we have sustained how we use the land, and we have these protocols that are very intrinsic to us. We have a very strong relationship to the same land, but again, an external factor comes in whereby those they need the same land for a different reason. And we've seen how this decision has really affected us. We as a community need to decolonize and try to ensure that in every decision that being made, we have a voice, we have our voice are considered. And those are the reason why we continue to organize ourselves and ensure that we have the right protocols. You talk about issues of water loss, which is also a great irony in the process, because at the end of the day, within the indigenous community, we have a land. We have that land that has been impacted for green transitioning. At the same time, we are battling with so many other issues, including access to water. So we need to relook and ensure that we bring indigenous community at the forefront. We ensure that they are part of decision making. Let's not impose decision to indigenous land without their knowledge. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I would like to open this up for the other panelists, but just before I move on, I just say if anyone sign up for the tour, it's happening in a minute, so feel free to leave. You have to go to the tour, but if everyone would like to stay for a little longer, we can do a bit more of a Q&A if that's okay. Yeah. Any response to that question?
I don't quite understand. Is the indigenous community made up of many tribes, several tribes, one tribe? And how does that function? Then there are all these disagreements within those tribes. If that's the case, how is that managed?
Indigenous community. Yes. Normally, we are organized into indigenous movement. Like, for example, in Africa, we have our own indigenous movement in Africa. In Eastern Africa, we have also our own indigenous movement in Eastern Africa. And when we reduce that one down more, is that we have so many indigenous communities with the same way of living and protocols in their land, which we look in a closer clans, you realize that there are very common similarities on how they manage land and how they relate with the same land. Maybe to mention and expound on green transitioning is that we become disadvantaged because we've seen our wind power, for example, like the one in the Lake Turkana, that green power has not benefited indigenous communities where the power itself was harvested from. The power indigenous community to continue to live in darkness, while the same green power, solar panel, for example, has been taken away to the cities. So it means that the solution, even if we are fighting for climate change, we should also reconsider how we ensure that we also light the indigenous villages so that they benefit from their own resources from their community instead of taking the resource and benefiting other people and themselves still battling about. And we're talking about green transitioning, whereby we wish to ensure that no one is left behind. So we need to reconsider on how decisions are made so that we are not marginalizing indigenous communities. Indigenous communities have said we are small, we are system, we can be communities, we can be nation, we can be a regional mechanism. We have our own networks and movement that binds us together. Thank you.
Did you have something to?
I mean, I guess the reason why the question was really important to me is because it kind of highlighted the contradiction in between what can be a technical solution and what can be a more like comprehensive systems solution to the climate emergencies that we're facing at the minute. And of course, like if we're going to head in the direction of like techno-solutionism, which is trying to find technologies that can allow us to live at current levels of consumerism and constant aggregation of more capital and more capital and more capital, then yes, we are going to face those exact contradictions. So thank you for bringing that up.
Could I just mention one last thing? Since we're talking about water, and you know the main message on all this sustainability is coming from the United Nations. For us in India, and I'm sure in Africa, one of the big bugbears for us in the global south when it comes to water and resources is Bill Gates. He's responsible for sterilization of seeds and of women as well. The irony here for me is he's also one of the biggest funders of the United Nations and the World Health Organization. So really, seriously, if we're talking about rights for the people, rights for the women, rights for the children, why and where are these conflicts of interest coming from? Bill Gates funds it to the tune of billions of dollars every year. At the same time, he's responsible for the suicide of farmers in India and also sterilization, many other things in the global south. No one's asking about this. Look at the huge conflicts of interest. And also he's buying huge tons of farmland in America, which is also a water resource issue as well. So where these conflicts of interest? Bill Gates Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think what's beautiful about all of our panelists, what they share, is that they did not disregard technology. I think Christine shared a lot of suggestion for policy and infrastructure and solution that has indigenous people at the heart of it. I think what you said that was so important in these discussions is that they have to be part of the discussion. It's not an absolute no or yes, it's that it's opening that space for dialogue. And I think all of you shared how these mechanisms and systems are completely intertwined with each of your own culture, traditions. I love that songs and sounds is a common thread throughout all of them. Maybe I'll take one more question. Okay, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. A question to Bint, if I may. It's about the way in which song can be part of resistance, right? So you've talked about the kind of Israeli techno-scientific hegemony in Palestine. How do you think those songs you talked about could evolve into something that helps underpin intergenerational resistance to the occupation? And, you know, thinking particularly in terms of countering the narratives that are, I mean, I work in the water science sector, that are predominantly pushed by the Israelis around, you know, blooming, making the desert bloom, etc., etc. So I wonder how you could envisage those songs and that whole use of culture as a sort of part of the resistance against that techno-scientific superiority, inverted commas.
Thank you. I think one of the most important things that the songs do, one of the reasons that drew me to them in the first place was the fact that they provide a counter map, and it's a map that I consider like somewhat radical for the simple fact that it doesn't need to be known, or it doesn't need to claim superiority over. It doesn't need to claim a finite version of the land. It's rather like the type of map that is transmitted, like you say, it has the potential to be intergenerational and transmitted across generations by virtue of the fact that it's transmitted using the voice. So it's inherent to what the sound does is it goes forward and it moves from like, let's say, one time signature to the next, from one person's mouth to the next. And that's like inherent kind of to the physical property of the sound, but also in the metaphors of when we are talking about sound transmission. And by virtue of the fact that those songs are sung always intergenerationally. So there are children who have never seen the land who know where the shrine is. So for me, that kind of memory keeping is a quite it's quite subversive to the knowledge of like a finite and known and kind of well documented hegemonic map of the occupier. That's one thing that's quite important. The next thing that's quite important for me is the challenge of hegemony over time resources and kind of like a very like strict like the future belongs to the techno solutionists kind of drum rhythm. And I want to invite anyone who's really interested to read Fred Moten's Al-Khwar rhythm on this, and come and ask me if you're interested in knowing more about this. But he's specifically talking about an extractive rhythm of time, and he kind of expounds on it like very beautifully and poetically as well. But the way that I think that song making is really important, and this is poetic and it's metaphorical, and I think I'm currently at peace with that because I'm not interested in bearing arms, and what that means to me is that when we are creating rhythm together, we are also firstly democratically redistributing and maybe arrhythmically redistributing time. We're not abiding by the clock of the extractivist that is trying to say that tomorrow looks like this, and the day after we're going to have desalination plants, and the day after, and that's what the future of water management in scarce areas looks like. The claim is over the future, not only over like a distribution of like daily mundane time. It's like the abstract concept notion of the future. So I think that music, because it's one of its core tenets is about rhythm, and rhythm is about redistributing time more democratically and in conjunction with whoever is in the room and like kind of with the enthusiastic consent of whoever's in the room. Music does that radically differently to how the colonizer does it. And finally, the rain summoning songs are particularly about determining what seasonality is looking like. And if you believe them, then you believe that you are also saying, no, winter is actually not over. And that's something that we are collectively deciding together. Summer is gone on a bit too long. We know that it's going to harm the plants if it's going to go on for longer. So yeah, maybe these things are like quite woo-woo and you know, like quite abstracted from the world. But I think that they, for me, they have offered like beautiful starting points into like rethinking colonization, clock. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. I'm sure we can sit here for another half an hour and continue to listen from our panelists, but unfortunately we have to close. Thank you, everyone. And I just want to say that if, like, I think this is one question that I get asked almost at every interview. What is the one thing that I've learned in my time making this exhibition? And I think you can see from today. And one biggest takeaway is the respect for seasonality, because water is a hydrological cycle. So there's so much to learn in remembering, in slowing down, in listening, in making sound, making song, in respecting communities' differences, and hopefully this have come through in our conversations today. Thank you so much.